All right, guys. So I wanted to personally come back and get touch back in, make sure everything's moving in the direction we want. Okay. And also, I'm working with Dylan on some customer service stuff.
Okay.
So I'm going to go over something with you that I want him to hear because it's part of our customer service training. Okay. So I'm going to share with you some things because, again, I know we're trying to get ourselves reestablished. And so I'm going to go over some of the details with that, some of the training that I want them to use because we help so many people get reestablished credit. I want to make sure that we're always clearly communicating. There's two big goals that I have when I'm helping somebody get reestablished. One is to actually help them get reestablished. The other one is to help them understand how to maximize their credit for future use as well, right? So that not only do you hopefully get what you want, but you also understand how the banking and how the system works a little bit better so you can work the system in your favor. Does that make sense? All right, so what I'm gonna do is, you got a pen handy, boss? Okay, so let me kind of spell some things out for you. Now, when a bank is looking at, and this will be helpful for you too as well, Jamal, this is just, again, basic. Yeah, for financing. I mean, again, when you're looking for your next vehicle too, okay? But when a bank is looking at a person in order to assess how to get them a loan or what kind of loan to give them, there's several specific things the bank looks at, okay? So the first thing I always tell people is when you think about a bank, you want to take into consideration the rate that the bank offers anybody will be equal to the risk of offering that loan to them. What I mean by that is anybody who has a high risk to the bank will have a high interest rate on the loan because the rate is always designed to offset the risk that the bank is taking in loaning you the money. If somebody has very low risk to the bank, they'll have a very low rate. So somebody with zero risk could qualify for 0%. Does that make sense?
Right.
So that's kind of how the math works. Now, when a bank looks at financing somebody, there's essentially four main things they look at. And I think of it like SWAT, like when you call in reinforcements, right? The SWAT team. So here's the four things the bank looks at. The first one then is what's called stability, okay? So stability, what the bank wants to know is two things: stability at the job and stability at the residence. Typically, you have less risk to the bank the more stable you are at your job and your house. Because if you're going to loan anybody money, you want to know that you can find them again if anything happens, right?
Right.
So job time stability, typically they look for 3 years as the baseline. Okay, then you have residence stability is, again, 3 years as the base time. Anybody who's been at the same job or the same house for 3 years is showing some stability in their life. Does that make sense? So for you personally, just curious, how long have you been at the same job?
10 years.
10 years, fantastic. So great stability that way. How long have you been at the same address?
4.5.
4.5, perfect. So as far as those two goes, that's good. The bank wants to see that. The next one is the area of willingness. Willingness is the next category. Willingness has two parts as well, okay? The first part of willingness is willingness to contribute. The next part of willingness is willingness to be flexible. So here's what I mean by that. Whenever you borrow money from the bank wants to know, what are you willing to put skin in the game yourself? So let's say you want to borrow 10 grand from the bank. The bank wants to know, well, if we loan you 10, how much are you willing to put towards it so that we're guaranteed that you're going to make your payments? So when you buy a car, for example, it's called cash down. The more cash down you do, the more willingness you are to contribute, the less risk you are to the bank, right? So in this case here, if you're looking at, let's say, for example, a $20,000 car, they'll look for 30% is the best. So 30% on 20,000 would be about $6,000 down. Anybody who goes to buy a car and it's a 20 grand car and they have 6 grand down, the bank's going to take a very serious look at them because they have a lot of skin in the game. Does that make sense? So the next part is flexibility. Sometimes somebody will come in and say, well, I want to borrow money and I want to buy that vehicle there. And the bank's going, I ain't going to loan you money on that vehicle there. You're not ready for that, right? So the willingness to be flexible on the exact vehicle the bank will offer. So the bank is saying, well, I'm not going to loan you money on that one. I'll loan you money on that one. Does that make sense?
Right.
So as far as the contribution, and I think you may have already talked about this, but how much were you able to contribute on this particular one?
Maybe 600. I don't know.
Maybe.
I'm just looking, you know.
Yeah, but 600-ish, something like that, okay? And is that money that right now you would already have saved up, or is that money that you would still be saving up?
I'll have it next week.
So you would have the 600 next week, okay? And now, are you still making payments on your Magnum as well?
Yes.
Okay. So, and if we trade out of the Magnum, then when is your next Magnum payment due?
Next week.
So, okay, so Were you already counting that money, or would you be able to add that money to this money? Because you're not going to have the Magnum payment, and you won't have a payment on the new one for how long?
45 days.
So you'd almost have like 2 months of not having to make the Magnum payment that you'd be able to potentially add to this. Keep in mind, whatever you add to this lowers risk, which makes the bank more attractive.
Right.
Does that make sense? So if you added the Magnum payment to this, what would the total be then?
That would be that'd be 879.
879.
Yeah.
So if we just round it and say 850, would you were planning on having the 600 anyway, correct? So would you, if you didn't make the Magnum payment, you didn't have a payment,
Right.
would you be able to add that and have a total 850?
Sure.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, and then of course the other part was flexibility, which you have already said you're flexible. You have certain ideas of what you need, but you're flexible, right?
Right.
Okay. Next part is then called ability. Ability is your ability to pay. Obviously, if a bank's going to loan you money, they want to know how able are you to make your payments. There's really two parts to that as well, okay? It has to do with income amount, like how much you earn, and how you earn the income. So for example, a salaried job is the most stable job you could have. So you have salary, then you have hourly, right? And then you have 1099 or, commissioned, kind of jobs. The most stable is salary, then hourly, and then, okay?
Right.
And then income-wise, the bank typically looks for at least $3,500 take-home minimum to show that you have stable income and, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So for you personally, what's your current income level? Is it $3,500 more or less? Approximately, what are you bringing in a month?
It should be right around that mark.
Yeah.
Right around that mark?
Yeah.
So that's the minimum there?
Bringing it around $45,000 a year, around there.
Okay,
Something like
So
so probably,
$3 grand a month.
so yeah, so right around that take home. Yeah. So that's the minimum. That's fantastic. Like I said, at least hitting the minimum helps. Next one is, of course, how you earn it. Are you hourly, salary, or?
Hourly.
Hourly. Okay, so hourly. Okay, fantastic. And then the last one is simply this. It's your track record. On the track record, what the bank wants to know with the track record is they want to know, again, two things. They basically want to know what have you had? What have you had for credit, right? And how did and how did you do it? Yeah, exactly. So the type of credit that you had and how you took care of your credit, basically. For example, if you've never had a car loan before, that's different for a bank than if you've had 4. If you've had big house loans and you've had a $100,000 house before and you've paid that, then loaning on a $20,000 car is not a big risk to the bank because they know you've already paid on a $100,000 house, right? So
the
what?
loan she has now on the Magnum, your aces.
Right.
You made 14 payments and 14 on-time payments.
Right.
Fantastic. And other than the Magnum, though, but that's the only real loan you've ever had, right? So what you have is you have limited track record in the sense of you have limited amount of diversity of loans. And also, do you remember how much the loan for the Magnum was? How much was it?
I want to say, goodness gracious, was it 8,000?
Something around 8,000?
Something like that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Between 8
So
and 10 or something like that.
yeah, so if you had an $8,000 loan before, then obviously the bank is going to say, well, she's clearly been good with $8,000 loans. Well,
It had been way more than that.
okay, it might have been.
Because you traded, you said you put $4 grand towards it.
Right.
Put $4 grand towards it, and then probably like a $15,000.
Okay, it might have been. It's been so long.
So if you owe
Right.
$6,000, she put $4 grand towards it. She's been paying it for 14 payments at 2 something a month, so it's got to be like $12,000.
Right, but the amount that she borrowed might have.
Oh, yeah, the amount
that's what I'm saying. The
financed.
the total amount financed might have been closer to 8,
Okay.
even if the purchase price was
Yeah.
higher. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
So in that case, because you had $4 grand down, going back to this number here, your $4 grand was the 30%. So that's why it was easy to get that loan.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying? So that's what's happening. So here, if your last loan was only for $8,000, the bank will say, well, we can trust her with 8 or maybe 10 or 12 grand. But when you get much bigger than that, the bank doesn't have a track record. So they're going, that's a little riskier, right? So the bigger the price tag, the more the risk relative to what your history is. That's all that's happening.
Right.
Okay. And then on that particular loan, you've paid well. Do you know whether or not on any other credit situations, whether it be medical or any other credit, do we know whether or not there's been any other credit concerns? Okay.
I know.
The last I had checked my credit was hospital bills, but
So you
they
do have-
won't take them off. They've been paid off. They've been paid in full for about 3 years now, 4 years.
Yeah, they'll stay on for 7 years
Oh.
unless, they stay. The records stay there for up to 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they go off. Now, if they show discharge paid, I mean, there's different ways they show up.
Okay.
But again, as a track record, they're still on there.
Okay.
And the banks, just like I said, when you're borrowing money from somebody, they just want to have a pretty good idea. What's the chances I'm going to get my money back?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I know.
So these are the variables that the bank wants to look at: your stability, your willingness, your ability, and your track record. That's how they're looking at it. What we do is we then share your story with the bank, because we understand that you're more than a credit score. There's a story. Right. In this case, there's a birthday story, right? So,
Yes.
so we just want you to know that's what we're working with on right now.
Okay.
We're taking all this information and we are going to bat for you on behalf of you to the bank.
Okay.
Trying to share your story.
All right.
But is this making sense to you now?
Yes, it does.
Jamal, does this make sense to you? Yeah. So again, whenever we're sharing with somebody how to get either established or reestablished credit, Dylan, it's very important that we don't just help them get the loan, but we help them understand how to improve their situation for the next loan and going forward. We empower the client.
I just learned a lot.
Little math lesson for you. Is that all right, Jamal?
Yeah, I love math, so.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get back to work for you. I just want to go over that, okay?
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. All right. What do you think of that, boss?
That was good. I loved it. Learned a lot.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's real good.